Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Squared Circle Calendar. And on this episode, um, we are going to be taking a look at the the time period of September 1975. What was going on in the world of professional wrestling around that time. Of course, at the time, Jack Briscoe was the reigning NWA World Heavyweight Champion. Hiro Matsuda was the reigning World Junior Heavyweight Champion. Fabulous Moolah was the reigning World Women's Champion. And one thing I just looking this up because I thought this happened a little later. Mind you, I thought this happened a little later, but it did not. On August the 23rd, 1975, in Boston Gardens, during a WWF show, um, Donna Christanello and Tony Rose regained the NWA World Women's Tag Team Championship from Joyce Grable and Vicki Williams, marking their third reign with the title. Um, Getting into September here, Christanella and Rose would tour briefly in the Mid Atlantic area for the early part of September until Christanello would go on to the West Coast to engage in some matches with Vicki Williams, partnering up with Sandy Parker out there, while Williams would partner up with Gene Antoine or Antone um, as they would wrestle for NWA Hollywood and Big Time Wrestling in San Francisco. So also among this, Fabulous Moolah was also touring Mid Atlantic area in the late August, early September time period, defending the titles there. Hiro Matsuda, after concluding a brief tour in Houston during the latter parts of August into early September, defending the title against Alberto Madrid on the 5th. Then between the 9th and 13th, he would go back down to Florida and defend the title against the likes of Ricky Gibson, Jim Dillon, and Ken Mantell, the former NWA World Junior Heavyweight Champion, the guy he would beat for the title, or and then Jack Briscoe was also touring Florida around this time as well, primarily in Florida, defending against the likes of guys like Bill Watt. After early in the month, defending his title in Vancouver against Gene Kiniski. He would then go on to Florida to defend against the likes, I believe, of like Bill Watts is one of them. I can't remember some of the others, but that's at least what was going on with the major titles at the time, the NWA titles. That's a lot of the main news there. So we'll get. So now, with that being said, let's start breaking down some of the stuff that was going on um, regionally. Over in Japan, of course, New Japan Pro Wrestling was hosting its Token Series. Among some of the talents there that were competing there included father and son duo Jacques Rougeau Sr. and Raymond Rougeau coming over from like Canada from representing Maple Leaf Wrestling. Also, as I mentioned in August as well, Hollywood Blondes Jerry Brown and Dale Roberts were were competing there as well. They were in a bit of a feud with initially it was Antonio Inoki and Seiji Sakaguchi over Japan's version of the NWA North American Tag Team Championships. The titles had been vacated after after a match in LA in the of August, early part of August, and had remained vacated until September, in which the Blondes had defeated the team of Strong Kobayashi and Seiji Sakaguchi for the titles. As their feud would continue throughout September during the Token series. Then over in England, as we get over to England, over in Britain, taped September 11th, 1975, to be played out on ITV's World of Sports over the weekends of September 13th and September 20th, respectively, of 1975. Was Joint Promotions had a super heavyweight knockout competition tournament with the semifinals being shown on September 13th of 1975, and the finals being shown on September 20th of 1975. So it was basically a mini tournament composing of 4 wrestlers, claiming to be giants in some form or another. The 4 wrestlers involved in the tournament were Mr. Mid Heavyweight Mike Marino, who at the time was Joint Promotions reigning British, European, and World Mid Heavyweight title. Now, over in Britain at this time, of course, they did have weight classes. Guys would wrestle guys outside of their weight class, but they would also have weight classes. Mid heavyweight was classified. The upper limit for mid heavyweight was classified as what they call 14 stone, which is equivalent to 18 pounds. 14 stone 13. Okay, so I'm sorry, not 18 pounds. 14 stone. So a stone is 14 pounds. Okay, I'm not 18. I was thinking of something else there. 14 stone, 13 pounds, which basically translated or it's 209 pounds is the upper limit for their mid heavyweight. So you had Mike Marino, Mr. Mid Heavyweight. You had a guy who was 6'6" by the name of Big Jim Moran. You had Kendo Nagasaki. Now, this Kendo Nagasaki Kendo Nagasaki was more or less a stage name, ring name used for numerous characters. The one here that wrestled on World of Sport was Peter Thornley. He was the original and probably best known. He basically primarily wrestled in Britain on ITV's World of Sport, but also did wrestle sometime in Stampede Wrestling in Canada. And the big 350 pounder or 25 stone 350 pounder big daddy Shirley Crabtree. So these 4 men, Mike Marino, Big Jim Moran, Kendo Nagasaki, and Big Daddy would wrestle each other to see who would win this super heavyweight knockout competition. The semifinals that were held on the 13th had Kendo Nagasaki defeating Big Daddy 1-0, and then Mike Marino defeating Big Jim Moran 2-0. One a fall, and then he ended up knocking him out. So, and then the finals between Mike Marino and Kendo Nagasaki were shown the following week. All the matches were taped on the 11th, but the finals of that little mini tournament were shown on ITV's World of Sport on the 20th, in which Nagasaki would defeat Mike Marino. As we move on from England to the Canadian wrestling scene, we first make a stop in the Maritimes provinces, where the big feud going on there was between Bulldog Bob Brown and Leo Burke, because they had been throughout much of the season, as they have an actual wrestling season there, had been feuding with each other. Bob Brown had wrested the tape fist title from Leo Burke in August. It was already as far as I know, the North American. I think he actually, let's see, Bob Brown would defeat Leo Burke in July for the Maritimes version of the North American Heavyweight Championship, and then in late August he would wrest the tape fist title from Leo Burke, and then on the 29th, on September 29th, Bulldog Bob Brown would team with the Patriot, not Del Welks or anybody or more mine. This is somebody else who went by the name of the Patriot. He would team with the Patriot to defeat Leo Burke and Roddy Piper for the Maritimes version of the International Tag Team Championship. So basically, the big feud going on in the Maritimes provinces at the time, which of course are Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. The big feud going on there was between Bulldog Bob Brown and Leo Burke. Heading out west to Vancouver in the Northwest Promotions territory, Tiger Jeet Singh had teamed with Dennis Stamp to defeat Dale Lewis and Mr. Saito for the Vancouver version of the Canadian NWA Canadian Tag Team Championships, in which marked the end of Mr. Saito's time in Vancouver, as he would move on down south to wrestle in California, primarily in San Francisco, for big time wrestling down there. But as this would eventually evolve with kind of a three-way feud going on for the Canadian Tag Team titles between the championship team of Tiger Jeet Singh, Dennis Stamp, fending off the challenges of both Dale Lewis and Siegfried Stanky, who recently dropped the Pacific Coast Heavyweight title to Gene Kiniski, and also the Kelly twins. So that was what was going on in in Canada. As we now go down to stateside, you had some of the big feuds going on throughout some of the territory. Go down to Puerto Rico. Carlos Colon and Jose Miguel Perez were fending off individual challenges from the Spoiler 1 and 2, in which Carlos Colon was going up against Spoiler 1 for the Puerto Rico version of the NWA North American Heavyweight Championship. And Spoiler number 2 did eventually beat Jose Miguel Perez for a short while on the 20th for the Puerto Rico Heavyweight Championship. And as we head up north to New York, to the Worldwide Wrestling Federation territory, Bruno Sammartino, the current reigning WWF World Heavyweight Champion, was fending off the challenge of George the Animal Steele under the management of the Grand Wizard Ernie Roth. Captain Lou Albano was managing the Blackjacks during their WWF World Tag Title reign at this time as well, fending off the challenges of former champions Pat Barrett and Dominic DeNucci, as well as as well as fending off some of the early challenges of the team that would eventually beat them, Louis Sardon and Tony Parisi. As we then head down to the Mid-Atlantic area in the Carolinas and Virginia, Ric Flair would eventually beat Wahoo McDaniel on the 20th in Hampton, Virginia for the NWA Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Championship. This of course would key on one of Ric Flair's early feuds that helped establish him as a main event star, which he would feud off and on over the years with Wahoo McDaniel, under the tutelage of Johnny Valentine, who was the reigning United States heavyweight champion at the time. So you had Flair, Valentine, and the Anderson brothers, Ole and Gene, against the faces of Wahoo McDaniel, Paul Jones, and of course for Flair, this was coming off his defeat by Jones for the television title too, and Tiger Conway Jr., Tony Atlas, and Ken Patera. When you head down to Georgia, one of the big stories down in Georgia is that in the Macon and Columbus areas, Bob Orton Jr. and Dick Slater were continuing their dominance down there as they were. Dick Slater was the reigning Macon and Columbus heavyweight champion, as well as teaming up with Orton Jr. to be the reigning Macon and Columbus tag team champions. They were forced to relinquish the Georgia tag championships, and on the heels of losing the Georgia Heavyweight Championship in Macon and on a Macon show on Tuesday, September the 16th, to Mike McCord, Professor Toru Tanaka would team with his former WWF World Tag Team Champion partner, Mr. Fuji, to somewhat rekindle their feud with Tony Garea and Dean Ho, as they would defeat him in the tournament final for the vacated Georgia Tag Team Championship at the Omni in Atlanta on the 19th. You go down to Florida and some of the feuds that were going on down there. Of course, Bob Roop was engaging in a feud with Dusty Rhodes, as also in that mix was, of course, Harley Race. Early on, Harley Race was, of course, being groomed as a main eventer. He was at the time the reigning Missouri State Heavyweight Champion, as well as having recently defeated Dusty Rhodes for the Southern Heavyweight Champion. On the heels of his defeat at the hands of Harley Race, he would wrestle and defeat Bob Roop for the Florida Heavyweight Championship. Also another feud going on in Florida at the time was Jim Dillon. Everybody knows him better as J.J. Dillon of Four Horsemen fame, teaming with Roger Kirby and feuding with the Negros, Ciclone Negro and Omar Negro, better known to most fans as Omar Atlas, over the Florida Tag Team Championships. And Rocky Johnson was also feuding with Rocky Johnson, the Rock's dad, feuding with Harley Race, both in Florida and in St. Louis. As we move on to the Gulf Coast territory, Ken Lucas would prove to continue to be a major force in the territory, as he would, he was he at the time throughout November was involved in a number of feuds over several titles. The Panhandle, he was the reigning Pensacola heavyweight champion, and was also in pursuit of the Panama City heavyweight champion. He was also currently the reigning City of Mobile heavyweight champion as well. Albeit he had also dropped the Gulf Coast tag title with partner Nick Kozak to the Bounty Hunters. But he was still the reigning mobile heavyweight and Pensacola heavyweight, and was also in pursuit of the Panama City heavyweight title. Bounty Hunters had engaged in a bit of a feud over the Gulf Coast tag team titles with the Wrestling Pros. Bob Kelly was in the midst of a feud with Melvin Kimball over the Mississippi heavyweight title, having dropped the title to Melvin Kimball on the 4th, regaining it on the 25th for his 21st reign as Mississippi heavyweight champion. As we head up from the Gulf Coast to Tennessee, some of the probably one of the biggest feuds going on at the time in Tennessee was in Memphis. It was in NWA Mid America between Mongolian Stomper and Bullet Bob Armstrong over the Tennessee version of the NWA Southern Heavyweight Championship. Going into the month, of course, Mongolian Stomper was the champion, but due to a few shenanigans, the title was continuously held up in their matches. One match even ending in a rematch to determine the champion on the 15th, ending in a draw. Ultimately, with Bullet Bob Armstrong winning the Southern Heavyweight Championship on the 29th. Also, among some of the other big feuds going on, include in Southeastern Championship Wrestling, bit of a three-way feud over the Tennessee tag titles between the Fullers, the Wrights, and Assassin and Rock Hunter. Rock Hunter was also kind of establishing himself as a major player in this area, as he was the reigning Southeastern Brass Knuckles and television champion at the time. They had established those titles in August. Moving further north to Detroit, Mark Lewin on the 27th. Mark Lewin would defeat the Sheik for the Detroit version of the NWA United States Heavyweight Championship. Also, as we move quickly throughout some of the other NWA territories, Ed Wiskowski was still dominating the Central States area as the Central States Heavyweight Champion. The Oates brothers were still the Central States version of the World Tag Team Champions. Then down in Texas, we would find Superstar Billy Graham and Alberto Madril being pushed as top stars in that area, as Graham would get some title shots at Jack Briscoe, and Alberto Madril was getting title shots at the World Junior Heavyweight Champion Hiro Matsuda. And that's at least all of the NWA stuff. In the AWA, Nick Bockwinkel was starting to get pushed as a main eventer. As I told you, there was a slow work throughout the year of 1975. Nick Bockwinkel being pushed up and up more, to eventually challenge Vern Gagne for the AWA World Champion, even though he and Ray Stevens had dropped the World Tag Team Champions to Dick the Bruiser and Crusher in August. I think he had some matches with Billy Robinson. Now, Dick the Bruiser and Crusher were dominating the tag scene in both the AWA and the World Wrestling Associations, as they would also defeat in September here would defeat the Legionnaires, Sergeant Jacques Goulet and Private Sobrov or Zabot um, for the World Wrestling Association World Tag Team Championship. In the IWA, Dino Bravo was named IWA Rookie of the Year. As Mil Mascaras and the Mongols would continue to dominate the respective singles and tag scenes in those areas. And of course, EMLL had their anniversary show in late November, which I believe which they had a great show for that. So that's all. That's basically a lot of the big news that happened in pro wrestling in September of 1975. Not a whole lot, still some stuff that we went through. If you guys would like to contact me directly, you can always comment on the community board or direct message me on my Discord. And if you guys like this content, please consider liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. I look forward to the conversation with you guys, as long as civil and respectful. And with that, I hope guys will watch this, catch this one, catch the VA profile I'll be doing tomorrow, as this is Saturday, Saturday, September the 12th, that I'm doing this latest update for September of 1975. I hope you guys, and I hope I'll catch you guys on the live stream on Monday, the 14th. And until then, bye.